Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to the channel. This Saturday is UFC 281, one of the most anticipated fight cards of the year. And in the featured fight on the main card, we have Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler. And this is going to be my full breakdown and prediction for this highly anticipated lightweight matchup. I've already done a bunch of predictions for UFC 281. I will link them all down in the description. But I still have prediction videos coming for UFC 281, including the main event, Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss those videos. This is a fight that I feel like has been in the making for years. When Michael Chandler was over in Bellator, it seemed like he was inevitably never going to leave Bellator and we were never going to see him in the UFC. But a guy that I kind of always wanted to see him fight was Dustin Poirier. And he finally got signed to the UFC 2 years ago. He leaves Bellator after a pretty successful run there. He was the Bellator lightweight champion for a little while there. And I was like, I want to see Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler. His debut was against Dan Hooker, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But there was some back and forth between these guys when Chandler first came into the organization. Dustin was kind of saying, oh, he's got to put his time in before he fights me, and I'd rather sell hot sauce than fight him. And I'm glad that finally, regardless of what's going on, we are finally getting this fight. And there is absolutely no way that Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler fight sucks. I mean, both of these guys are action fighters. Both these guys are never in a boring fight. And I really just can't imagine a world where Poirier versus Chandler is boring. The only thing I'm a little bit disappointed in, and we're going to talk about this later in the video as well, I wish this fight was 5 rounds. Because you look at Dustin Poirier, he's had 2 title shots in recent years. He lost to Khabib Nurmagomedov, and he just recently lost to Charles Oliveira. And for Chandler, he lost against Charles Oliveira for the vacant lightweight title. And we're going to talk about all those fights here in a little bit. But I still feel like now that we have a new champion, Islam Makhachev defeats Charles Oliveira at UFC 280, I feel like there are some title implications on the line here. I know the division is kind of in a weird spot. Supposedly, we are going to get Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski, the super fight UFC 284 in February of 2023. But outside of that, you have Beneil Dariush as kind of the #1 contender, who I believe is most deserving to fight for the lightweight title. After that, you kind of have the winner of this fight. Both these guys are ranked in the top 5. And while I want to see some of that new blood on the back end of the top 10 and top 15 make their way to the top of the division and fight for a title, I think there is a good chance whoever wins this fight may be one fight away from a potential title shot. And for Michael Chandler, who has the only title loss to Charles Oliveira versus Poirier, who has 2 title losses in recent history and one being against Khabib Nurmagomedov, I think if Chandler wins this fight, he's in a very good position, especially considering his skill set. I feel like a lot of people think that he will cause problems for Islam Makhachev. So if Chandler wins this fight, he's in a very good spot to fight for the title. If Dustin Poirier wins this fight, I think he's pretty close. I still think Beneil Dariush is the #1 contender. But honestly, you could do the winner of this fight versus Beneil Dariush while Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski goes down to make a #1 contender, because if Dustin Poirier or Michael Chandler get a title shot over Beneil Dariush without beating Beneil Dariush, I'm going to riot. That would be absolutely egregious. Dariush has earned this shot. I want to see him fight for the belt. But nonetheless, this fight is very important for both guys, and it could earn them a title shot in the very near future. So if you look at the tail of the tape for this fight, you have Dustin Poirier, who's 28-7, Michael Chandler, who's 23-7. Poirier is ranked #2. Chandler is ranked #5. Poirier is 33. Chandler is 36. Poirier is 5'9". Chandler is 5'8". Poirier has a 73-inch reach, and Chandler has a 71.5-inch reach. So a slight height and reach advantage for Dustin Poirier. You look at Michael Chandler's pro MMA career. Of his 23 wins, 11 by knockout, 7 by submission, 5 by decision. Of his 7 losses, 4 by knockout, and 3 by decision. He comes into this fight only on a 1-fight winning streak. He defeated Tony Ferguson May of this year at UFC 274, and this was when he absolutely decimated Tony Ferguson and punted his head into the crowd, flatline KO'd him in the second round. And I know people are kind of diminishing Tony Ferguson, saying Tony Ferguson has fallen off a cliff. And after that performance at UFC 279, I can't defend it anymore. Tony Ferguson has fallen off a cliff. But I do believe at that point in time, Tony Ferguson was still a pretty good fighter. I thought he fought some terrible matchups stylistically against Beneil Dariush and Charles Oliveira, but I still thought Tony had it. I actually picked Tony Ferguson to beat Michael Chandler. In the first round, Tony Ferguson looked really good. And Michael Chandler, got dropped in that first round. He ended up wrestling towards the back end of that first round and maybe stealing the round. I think Tony Ferguson still should have took the first round. But in that second round, Michael Chandler came out and threw that brutal front kick and absolutely flatlined him. How much does it really mean? I still think it's a quality win, but it's hard to say after looking at the Tony Ferguson that showed up at UFC 279 against Nate Diaz. But that was on short notice, and he had took the Li Jingliang fight on short notice as well. So it's kind of up for interpretation. The fight before that, he fought Justin Gaethje last year at Madison Square Garden, UFC 268. And I had the same feeling about this fight going into it. This was a crazy, wild fight while it lasted. It was competitive. But I thought Justin Gaethje won this fight pretty clearly, almost finished Chandler in the second round. I don't remember what the scorecards were, but I either had Justin Gaethje 30-27 or 29-28. It was a competitive fight. Gaethje almost finished him in that second round. The first round, Chandler had tagged Gaethje a couple times, but Gaethje had tagged him. It was an incredible fight. The third round was kind of both guys a little bit gassed out, and Chandler was kind of showboating to the crowd, and I think I scored that for Justin Gaethje as well. But it was still a competitive fight, and it was a crazy fight. But Michael Chandler ultimately loses by decision. The fight before that was a vacant title fight against Charles Oliveira. This was after Khabib Nurmagomedov vacated his lightweight title, and Chandler was so close to becoming lightweight champion, and he almost finishes Charles Oliveira in the first round. This was back at UFC 262, May of last year. But in that second round, Charles Oliveira comes out, clips Michael Chandler, and then just brutally TKOs him up against the fence. But I still think there were some good takeaways for Michael Chandler in this fight, because not only did he almost stop Charles Oliveira in the first round, at one point in the first round, Charles Oliveira had his back and was unable to submit Michael Chandler, which I think is a feat in itself. The fight before that was his UFC debut against Dan Hooker. And Dan Hooker, I know, again, kind of on the decline now, but at the time, this was a really good win from Chandler. Went out there and KO'd him in the first round. What an amazing UFC debut. And then you start to get to his Bellator career, which I'm not going to go through too much, but Michael Chandler had a very successful run in Bellator. Former Bellator lightweight champion. His last fight in Bellator was KOing Benson Henderson, which I know Benson Henderson's on the tail end of his career, but still to put him out in the fashion he did was impressive. Those Eddie Alvarez fights with Michael Chandler were absolute insanity. Has a win over Patricky Pitbull via KO. So Michael Chandler had a very good career in Bellator. I know a lot of people didn't follow his Bellator career, but Michael Chandler was one of those guys where we were like, oh, maybe he could beat the lightweight champion. Back in the day when he was in Bellator, people were fantasizing about him coming over to the UFC and fighting some of the UFC lightweight contenders. So you move over to Dustin Poirier. Of his 28 pro MMA wins, 14 by knockout, 7 by submission, and 7 by decision. Of his 7 losses, 2 by knockout, 3 by submission, and 2 via decision. His last fight was against Charles Oliveira at UFC 269, December of last year. And this was a fight where Poirier looked pretty good. He landed some good shots on Charles Oliveira. He had some good moments, but ultimately Charles Oliveira ducks under a punch, takes the back of Dustin Poirier, and gets the standing rear naked choke. But Charles Oliveira, with the win over Islam Makhachev, which obviously he didn't get, he would have been considered the GOAT lightweight in most people's mind. So not a terrible loss to have. And Charles Oliveira's jiu-jitsu and grappling game is just unbelievable. So not a terrible loss for Poirier, especially considering he had a good showing. The fight before that, he beat Conor McGregor via TKO at UFC 264, July of 2021. And I know people are going to say, but the broken leg, Dustin Poirier 10-8'd him in that round before the broken leg, okay? And I know, ultimately it was a doctor stoppage TKO, but Dustin Poirier was going to win that fight. Conor McGregor basically had no chance to win that fight. And even if you want to say, well, it's MMA, anything can happen. Well, then I advise you to look back a few months at UFC 257 when he fought Conor McGregor for the second time. And he TKO'd him in the second round, put him out cold, had him sleeping up against the fence. So quality wins from Dustin Poirier over Conor McGregor. What Conor McGregor was that? You know, even if you want to say he's regressed from the 2016 Conor McGregor, I still think these were solid wins for Dustin Poirier. The fight before that, he fought Dan Hooker in one of the best fights of 2020. A back-and-forth fight. He beats Dan Hooker via decision. Fight before that, he lost a lightweight title shot against Khabib Nurmagomedov. Pulled a guillotine, midway through the fight, and then eventually ends up getting rear naked choked in the third round, losing to Khabib Nurmagomedov. But Khabib Nurmagomedov is considered the GOAT lightweight, so not a terrible loss to have. And one other thing I want to mention about Dustin Poirier's resume. Win or lose, I mean, this guy has one of the craziest resumes I've ever seen. He fought Max Holloway for an interim lightweight title, which he defeated Max Holloway. Beat Eddie Alvarez via TKO. Beat Justin Gaethje via TKO. Submitted Anthony Pettis. Just has win after win. Has fought such good competition. Fought Conor McGregor on the come up at 145. Fought Chan Sung Jung and when he lost in 2012. I mean, this guy has been fighting top competition for about a decade. That's absolute insanity. Dustin Poirier, I mean, one of the all-time greats in the UFC, and I still believe, even though he's never been able to call himself undisputed champion, I think he's one of the greatest lightweights of all time. Where you rank him on that list is debatable, but I mean, the guy has an unbelievable resume since he's moved up to lightweight. So when I look at this fight between Dustin Poirier and Michael Chandler, I see two guys who are very well-rounded, but I see each guy has their own distinct strengths and weaknesses in this fight. I think Dustin Poirier has the stamina advantage, but the fight is not 5 rounds, which we're going to talk about in a second. I think Dustin Poirier has the durability advantage. I think he has, Dustin Poirier, it's very rare that you see Dustin Poirier stopped by strikes. He has not been stopped by strikes in a very long time, since Michael Johnson back in 2016. And I think before that was the Conor McGregor KO way back when. I think it was in 2013, 2014. So Dustin Poirier, super durable. I think Dustin Poirier has an advantage with the boxing. I think he's just a little bit better boxer than Michael Chandler. But I think Michael Chandler, he has the advantage with speed, explosiveness, power. I think Chandler has the wrestling advantage. I think Chandler has the jiu-jitsu advantage. So this is a very tough fight to pick. I think this fight can go either way. I think a lot of people are thinking, if Michael Chandler goes out there and wrestles Dustin Poirier, he can win the fight. He can take Dustin Poirier down, control him on the ground, and win the fight via decision. But has Michael Chandler ever done that in his entire career? You go through his UFC career, you go through his Bellator career. Michael Chandler has never been a guy that's going to look to take you down and just grind you out via decision. It's just not going to happen in my mind. I don't think Michael Chandler is going to do that in this fight. I think he's going to come out, look to be super explosive early, look to land with very powerful shots to the chin of Dustin Poirier, and look to put him out early. I think Michael Chandler's most likely path to victory is a first-round KO. I think there's a chance he could win a decision, but I think a decision favors Dustin Poirier. I think Dustin Poirier could win via KO, TKO, or decision. I don't see Dustin Poirier submitting Michael Chandler unless he hurts him badly and then jumps on like a guillotine or something along those lines. I think Michael Chandler could go the wrestling route and beat Dustin Poirier, but I don't think it's super likely. He's never done it in the course of his career. And also on top of that, Michael Chandler, his stamina is good, don't get me wrong, but he doesn't have the cardio to go out there and wrestle for a hard 3 rounds. It's just not there. That's why he's never done it. He's super explosive, so he kind of gasses out. In that 3-round fight against Justin Gaethje, he was super explosive early. Second round, he started to slow down. Third round, he was completely exhausted. So Michael Chandler and that stamina disadvantage, I think, is going to play a factor in this fight. I think Michael Chandler has a much better chance to win this fight. Considering it's 3 rounds over 5 rounds, I think the 3-round fight favors Michael Chandler. I think a 5-round fight would vastly favor Dustin Poirier. He's been in so many 5-round fights, and he's just so durable. And I think Dustin Poirier's stamina would have led him to maybe a late-round stoppage against Michael Chandler. I think that would have been a very high probability in a 5-round fight. But for my official prediction for this fight, I am going to go Dustin Poirier via third round TKO. I just think Dustin Poirier is a little bit crisper with the boxing. I think Michael Chandler is just a little bit chinny. I don't want to say, his chin is not gone like Cody Garbrandt or Marlon Moraes, but if he gets clipped and he gets hurt against Dustin Poirier, we've seen Dustin Poirier time and time again. If he hurts you, he does not let you off the hook. And if he stings Michael Chandler in this fight, he will swarm him badly and he will finish him. And I think that the first round is kind of going to be Dustin Poirier playing it safe. He's going to be chopping the calves of Michael Chandler, which we've seen Michael Chandler be susceptible. He's very heavy on that lead leg. He's squatting down, looking to land a big overhand right. And I think Dustin Poirier is going to just look to avoid the power of Michael Chandler in that first round. I think he's going to look to throw those calf kicks and limit the mobility and the explosiveness of Michael Chandler. And as the fight goes on, Poirier is going to be pumping the jab. And I think eventually, as Michael Chandler begins to wear down, he's going to whiff on a lot of big power punches. He's going to start to get, slow down a little bit in that second round like he always does. And then in the third round, I think the stamina difference is going to be massive. And I think in that third round, Dustin Poirier is going to clip him with the hands. And then Michael Chandler is going to try to shell up. And Dustin Poirier is going to TKO him with a barrage of shots, similar to how he finished Conor McGregor at UFC 257. I see him just throwing like a 5-10 punch combination and finishing off Michael Chandler via TKO in the third round. I just think the combination of the little bit crisper boxing from Dustin Poirier, or really, I think it's a significant boxing advantage, actually. Chandler has decent hands, but he's really always throwing bombs. He's never looking to throw combinations. He's never really setting up his shots. So I think Poirier, he has that decent defense. He's super defensive. He's shelling up well. I think early he's going to be very defensively and chopping those legs. And I think late he's going to find the chin of Chandler, hurt him badly, and then swarm him and TKO him. I think if Chandler wins this fight, it's going to have to be via first round TKO. But I think Poirier is going to be super conservative early, and he's going to avoid those big shots of Michael Chandler and inevitably TKO him in that third round. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.